chapter of NOW. I am the outgoing president. My last day is today because I have a little baby who's sitting over there in Sandy's lap. I'm going to focus on my career and helping raise her for the next year, and will be involved in other capacities. So thank you all for the past 2 years of giving me leadership skills and helping me learn as a person and help the organization grow. Now I'm very happy to introduce our moderator for today's forum, Terry O'Neill. She is the national president, the National Organization for Women president. She's been our president since 2009. Terry is a resident of Maryland, so she is a member of our chapter, our Maryland chapter, as well as the Montgomery County chapter. Before coming here, she was a law professor at Tulane, where she also went to law school. She taught a lot of classes. The one that's near and dear to my heart, although I wasn't her student, is feminist legal theory, and many other courses. She, before that, was in private practice, but found her way into the feminist movement, and we're so glad that she's here. How the forum will work today is we'll have the two candidates sitting up here. And we'll have Terry as well, if you want to sit in the middle, or we'll figure out the best spot for you. If the audience has questions, what we would ask you to do is, if anyone did not receive a yellow sheet of paper, can someone with one of those please hold it up to show? If you did not receive one of those and you would like one, let us know. Raise your hand and we'll get you one in just a minute. Jeanette's going to go get some more. The bottom of that paper has a little, some lines you can rip off your written question. We're going to take written questions. They're going to go in a basket, which will be passed around. It's a large straw basket. And then we will give those questions to Terry O'Neill, who will look through them and ask the questions of the candidates. So I'd like to bring up Terry O'Neill, our National Organization for Women president.
There's quite a few people in the audience. Come on in and have a seat. For those of you who are not as familiar with NOW, let me just very briefly tell you. Next year, in 2016, NOW will celebrate its 50th anniversary. Since the 1970s, the National Organization for Women has recognized that achieving equality for women will require an interlocking approach to the issues that have held women back for centuries. By interlocking approach, what I mean specifically is that NOW has 6 core issues that we work on to achieve equality for all women. It is getting women into the Constitution of the United States. Yes, we definitely are still working for the ERA, but also achieving reproductive health care for all women, ending racism, because anything that holds back our sisters of color holds us all back. Ending homophobia and achieving lesbian rights and LGBTQIA rights. Ending violence against women and achieving economic justice for all women in all communities. Those, nowadays, we use the word intersectional. NOW is very much takes an intersectional approach to women's equality, and that is what we're really all about. So the questions that are going to be asked, of course, will flow from NOW's core issues, obviously. I would now like to ask our candidates to come forward. So we have our timekeeper. First, Susan, thank you so much for serving. Susan Martin from Montgomery County NOW will be serving as the keeper. And I'm just going to ask each individual to give a 3-minute, just a 3-minute introductory remarks. Representative Chris Van Hollen, Donna Edwards. Who do you want to go? Chris, you want to go first? Seniority.
Oh. Should we stand up? Or,
yes.
I think for people in the back. So first of all, to Terry O'Neill and Maryland NOW and National NOW, thank you for being the leading edge of the fight for equality, equality for opportunity, equal rights, equal justice in America, and the progress we've all made together, and we all know the distance we still have to go. I just came from Baltimore this morning. I was there yesterday as well, helping with some of the relief efforts. And when I look at the situation in Baltimore, the core issues of social justice and equal rights and equal opportunity are the rights that NOW has fought for. They're based on moving women's rights forward, but really the core of the idea is the powerful idea of equality for all people. When I was in the Maryland legislature, I led the fight on the gay rights legislation to end discrimination in Maryland in employment for gays. It didn't matter whether I was gay or not. The fact of the matter is, I stepped up the plate, I led that fight on the floor of the state senate, and we got it done. And Maryland became one of those states where gays were protected against employment discrimination under state law. Years later, when it came to the marriage equality fight, I was pleased to step up and lead the challenge among elected officials to make sure the resources were there for that campaign. It didn't matter whether I was gay or not. What mattered was we were all in it together as a human rights issue. This is the 25th anniversary of the Americans for Disabilities Act. The priority for the disabilities community this year was passing something called the ABLE Act to make sure that families with kids with disabilities could put aside a little money to care for their kids. I don't have a severe disability. People in my immediate family don't have a severe disability, but they asked me to be the lead Democratic sponsor, and we got that done. And that is part of the agenda for civil rights, to make sure that people with disabilities can achieve their full potential. When I first ran for the House of Delegates in 1990, we had a Democratic senator, Peg Schweinhaut. She was a great senator on lots of issues, but she was against changing Maryland law, which at the time restricted a woman's right to choose under Maryland law. And we all worried the Supreme Court of the United States, because we all know it's very tight, 5-4, was going to overturn Roe v. Wade and leave in place a restrictive abortion law in Maryland. So I was part of the choice team. The fact of the matter is, it wasn't at that time seen as a woman's issue or a man's issue. It was an issue of freedom of choice, and something that was important to women and men and families. And all of these issues that we're going to be talking about today, that NOW has fought for so long, in my view, are issues of human rights and equal rights. And we need to be in that fight together on all these issues to move the ball forward, to make sure that we can achieve the promise of America, which is equal opportunity, equal justice, and equal rights. We've come a long way, but we have a whole long way to go together. So thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you so much. Representative Donna Edwards.
Well, good afternoon. Is my microphone on? Not the switch.
Switch. Yeah, take her. Take.
Oh, there it goes. Good afternoon. I'm Congresswoman Donna Edwards, and I have the great privilege of representing Maryland NOW in the Congress since 2008. And I want to thank Maryland NOW, National NOW, Montgomery County NOW, because you were with me from the very beginning. And when I first ran for Congress, the political insiders said, nah, she can't do it, she'll never win, what's the point in taking on an entrenched incumbent, it will never happen. And with your help, we defeated those odds. It's quite revealing and important today that we acknowledge that here in the home of the Montgomery County Educators Association, we also acknowledge the passing of Dr. Paul Vance just yesterday, who was the first African-American superintendent to lead Montgomery County's public schools, and who was the 18th head of the Montgomery County branch of the NAACP. Perhaps a testament to the distance at which we've come, but also to the work that we still have to do. And so we send our condolences to the Vance family. When I first came to Congress, one of the things that I really wanted to do was really to fight for children. And so for years, Maryland had been eligible for its school children who receive free and reduced lunch to also receive supper. And yet, despite the number of Democrats in our delegation, despite the fact that this eligibility had been for a long time, and 44% of Maryland students actually do receive free and reduced lunch. And it's hard to acknowledge that in an environment where many of us feel like we're doing so well. And so today, because of what I did just 2 months into being in the Congress, students who receive free and reduced lunch here in Maryland now also receive supper. I think it's those battles that when a voice is at the table that's the voice of a mom, that is the voice of a woman when it comes to child care or equal pay, is really important. When it comes to abortion, the voice at the table of a woman is a difference, and it's important. And it's not that there aren't other voices that are valued, but it's really important, and especially today as we look at the aftermath of the last week or so in Baltimore, to know that it's important in a democracy for all of our voices to be at the table. So I look forward to the conversation that we're going to have today about the future of Maryland and about the leadership of Maryland and about the choices ahead. Thank you very much.
So the first question, I'm going to alternate in asking each person to go first. So Representative Edwards, I will ask you first. Both of you have mentioned Baltimore, and indeed the largest city in our state is in crisis, has been in crisis for quite some time, and really the events in Baltimore cry out to be responded to. What now views that as an example, what's going on in Baltimore and the tragic and outrageous death of Freddie Gray as an aspect of state violence. We know that state violence affects women and girls in distressed communities, and not just men. So one of the things I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about, and I guess this is a very large question for which I apologize, but I wanted to get at what should be done in Congress to reduce state violence, specifically with the impact on women and girls, but also private violence. There's not necessarily a connection, but there is at some point a connection between private violence, and now has been very active in ending violence against women, domestic violence, sexual assault, and so forth. So what needs to be done in Congress on these two aspects of violence?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And I'm going to stand so that people in the back can see. When I first came to Congress, I started going around to, unfortunately, the prisons and jails that both house men and women. And when I would talk especially with the young people in prison, what they would say, almost to a one when you ask them to raise their hand, because I spent about 20 years or so working on issues of domestic violence, was the lead in the passing of the Violence Against Women Act back in 1994. Almost every single hand went up when asked the question about whether they had witnessed or experienced violence in their homes. And so I view that as a very root of what happens in so many of our communities. It destroys the fabric of our families and our communities. And in Congress, we have the ability to do some things. For example, I voted against militarization of the police long before Ferguson. And I have that as my record. You can check other records.